Hey guys, so I know that this is going to be a little bit of a different video, but very quickly before it starts, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the amazing feedback and the good engagement I got on the last video. I know this one is a little bit different, but I still hope that you guys enjoy it. I'm just trying to make different content, see what works, what doesn't, not only for you guys, but also for my enjoyment. So yeah. Everyone knows that to some extent the gear and the settings you use matter, but how much do they actually? That's what today's video is going to be about, where I'm going to be breaking down most, if not every facet of equipment that you could be using to help you in your journey of becoming a better player in whatever game you like, and which I feel are more important than others. First of all, who am I to be telling you what's good and what's not? Well, I've been playing Counter-Strike since about 2016 competitively. I've hit face at level 10, made ESEA main playoffs, and competed in multiple regular seasons of ESEA main, and I've even gotten to a small LAN finals versus an ECL team mix. Shout out to Game Arena. My background isn't the most glorious, lauded, or accomplished by any means, and I want to be fully transparent about that, because in my opinion, it actually gives me an advantage when talking about what's valuable for the average person. Realistically speaking, life happens. As much as I would love to be a full-time content creator, streamer, or playing CS competitively, I think that most people watching this have other, way more necessary and important things that money has to go towards, and understanding where the optimal value is in every category is important. As a heads up, after this video, I am going to be making a follow-up about improvement, training, kind of regimenting it so that you're always improving and learning, and that kind of focus area. So leave a comment if you want to see that, and subscribe if you're interested. So before we start getting into defining good gear and telling you what's good versus what's bad, I want to actually make a definition for good equipment, and that's going to be that it should honestly feel almost invisible during gameplay. If your confidence directly translates to better performance. If you're constantly adjusting or second guessing your equipment, it's not doing its job. I've had my fair share of keyboards, mice, and even other things like headphones where I've been constantly changing, trying to tweak settings in the middle of a game. And all that's going to do for you is take you out of the experience, make you miss a couple of things. Even if you're dead and you're just spectating your teammates, you could be providing valuable insight on that game. And when you're twiddling with your settings, that's not something that you're going to get as much of. So in this regard, I'm going to be covering both the standard options, which is kind of like the more baseline ones for if you're just starting your competitive journey, or kind of where people go more premium and see if you want to spend that extra little bit of budget to see if it's actually beneficial for you. One major thing that I do want to say before this is that even though I can't definitively say prices for the used market, I heavily advocate for you looking in your local used markets, whether that's marketplace, eBay. I recommend things in this video like build a PC sales, hardware swap, and I think Mousepads on all subreddits are wonderful for actually getting good deals and from people who actually take care of their stuff. That's another really important facet of this. If you're in a different country or in a different region completely, obviously you're going to have to do your own research and see what works for you versus what doesn't. But I do feel like those are going to be your best options when you're looking for stuff that doesn't blow out the bank account, but provides honestly better value than getting a lower tier brand new piece of equipment. Okay, so I didn't have enough black mice to commit to the bit, but you kind of get the vision. But why start with mice first? Well, to be honest, I feel as though this is one of the most important aspects of your game. Now, generally mice are pretty good, especially ones that are meant for gaming. Most switches are going to be decent, the sensor's not going to be a problem, and in CS, at least in competitive CS, the pro standard is the Razer Viper and the Logitech Superlight, and quite frankly, for the price, I don't think that this is a good step into upgrading your mice. Mouse selection is something that it has its own culture and mentality around completely, and if you take 2 seconds in the mouse review subreddit, you're going to see that. I would say that if you're starting out, you need to learn the difference between grip styles such as palming, fingertip, and claw grip, and consider what matters most to you in terms of feature set. So really quickly here, what I'm going to do is go over the basics of those, just in case you've never heard of them. I'm not going to delve too deep into it because that's not the purpose of this video, but just so you guys get a general idea, I will show you this. So palm type mouse are generally a little bit bigger. They're meant to fit your whole hand on the mouse, covering every contact point of your hand. If you look at mine here, it's pretty small. That's what everybody's told me, smile. But anyways, this G502, you can see every point of my hand will be making contact with it when I'm playing with it. When I'm moving it around, it is feeling like a brick. And honestly, this was the first mouse I used when I was playing Counter-Strike back in 2016. And I did like it at the time for the extra bind buttons on the side, which you can see right here. So you get an additional button on each here by mouse 1, and then you get 2 extra ones down here for push to talk. So that's what I first started with. The most recent palm mouse that I used was actually the second to last mouse I used, which is this. This is the Lamzu Thorn X, or Thorn, I don't remember the exact name, with some custom grips installed, and I'll get into that later. But this one is also a palm type mouse where my hand is making full contact in every point, and yeah, you can see it there. Now, moving next to the claw type grip. For this, I would say the best ones that I have for this example are going to be this G305, which honestly isn't even working at the moment because I've been modding it and using some of the internals for other projects. And claw grip is generally looking a little bit like this. So you see there is a little bit of a gap between my hand and the mouse itself. And I also use that grip very similarly on the Maya here. And what this does, it gives me a lot more flexibility when I'm playing the game. If I want to just full commit to palm, I can, but if I want to have a little bit more micro adjustment, I can also do that with the claw grip. And in my experience for CS, this is the Lamzu Maya. This is my favorite mouse that I've been using recently, and it's really, really good. I think that obviously if you're just starting out, it's definitely overpriced. You're definitely probably not going to benefit from the optical switches or the 8K hertz polling. Realistically, I keep it on 2K hertz at all times just because of the battery life drain, and the super lightweight of 47 grams is really nice, but it's not necessary. Lastly, I don't actually have a great fingertip mouse. I think the closest one would be the Orochi, but even then, that's not a really super great example. You could use things like the HTX Ace, or I'll put up an image of it on the screen here, but you'll see what I'm talking about. These mice are meant for only your fingertips to be points of contact, so you're effectively holding them something like this, and these are only really good for, I would say, things like tracking games like Overwatch, or if you're specifically a Kovac or aim trainer player. I think those are pretty good in those scenarios because it gives you the most micro control, but it doesn't really give you any big sweeping control. Because imagine you're trying to make a big turn in CS, especially if you're a lower sense player, and this is all you're doing. That sucks. Whereas with the Maya, I get the option for both micro control, but also I can just palm it and do a lot bigger movements like this a lot faster. So I think that for me, the Maya X is probably one of the best ones, and I would easily recommend claw grip for most people. If not, I would definitely, ooh, I bumped the camera there, sorry about that. I would definitely recommend the Thorn or anything palm grip. These are probably the two most general, common mouse grips that you can use. Now, do I specifically recommend the Maya X and the Thorn? Well, no, not if you're starting. If you're already a couple years in and you know what you want, then yes, I can talk about getting these specifically, or any other like higher tier $100+ mouse for you. That is completely fine if you're a couple years into it. If you're just starting out, I would say go on Mousemarket and see if you can find a deal on mice you think are cool. You can use a couple of different tools like eloshapes.com to see what the mice look like, and based on your hand size and grip preferences, I know people like Rocket Jump Ninja have their own websites that, compare what mouse sizes are best for certain hands and what grip styles and stuff like that. Now, those do have a little bit of controversy because, again, at the end of the day, it's all preference. So you're just going to really have to mess around and see what you like versus what you don't. So if I were you, what I would do is I would take advantage of Amazon's generous return policy and test out a couple of different shapes. Honestly, buy a couple of different cheap mice, like either the G305 or the Orochi, see if you like those if you're just starting out. Now, I will say I do think that there are a better option for just starting out than the Orochi or the G305, although these do get recommended a lot. And the reason for that is that they're made from very reputable brands in the industry. Logitech, Razer. I personally know a little bit more because I'm more into the mouse scene, so I could recommend something like the VXC Dragonfly R1, which you can find either on AliExpress or stuff like that, and it's going to be a lot cheaper, going to provide a lot of value, and it's honestly, for the money, it's comparable to something like the Maya or the Thorn, not in quality or in terms of like feature set, but it's a wireless mouse, it's pretty cheap, pretty lightweight, and for people who are just starting out, those are the main features that make them feel like they want to spend more into the premium category, so I can easily recommend those kind of mice. So now let's talk a little bit about things like grips, skates, and other mice accessories. While they can be useful, I don't think that they're make or break really. You'll notice that on my Thorn, I actually have some super grip textured on here on each of the sides of points of contact. I only did that because I don't actually like the coating on the Thorn as much. My hands generally get sweaty, and you can actually see it a little bit on this mouse right now where it's not gripped up. but on the Maya, it's a lot better and improved. Do I think that it's a life changer? No. You can do the same thing by just getting a little towel and just drying your hands off in between rounds. It's not really going to be the biggest difference ever. Now, skates do have a little bit more impact. They will change the glide speed of your mouse. So you'll see I'm just going to push my mouse and it glides a little bit more here. I think the Thorn has the fastest of these. So you can see I just tapped it and it's flying across my mouse pad pretty quickly. Now, none of these have the boardsy thing, like they have super glass skates where they're going to do 360s when I twist it or anything like that. I'm not a speed pad user. I don't like my mice to be super fast, so that's not going to be something I really recommend. But just like the mice themselves, all of this stuff is going to be on personal preference. On top of that, I would say that the mice grips are inexpensive. I mean, the Thorn and the Maya both actually came with their own mouse grips in box. These little dots you can buy from Razer, they're like a pack of 20 or 30. They're like 15 bucks. And honestly, I don't feel like they're game changers. You can't really go wrong because, like I said before, it's only 15 or 20 bucks. And honestly, I think it's fine if you want to go for that. I don't have any experience with things like an arm sleeve or anything like that to reduce friction. I know some people swear by them, but for me, it's not something that I've been interested in. One thing I will say is if you have a wired mouse, and especially if it's an older mouse that has a rubber cable, invest in a mouse bungee. I actually threw out mine because, as you can see, my most recent mice are all wireless, and most of them actually have paracord, but a mouse bungee will basically take this part of the cord and hold it up so you don't feel the resistance while you're playing and moving it around. And if you don't have that, or if you can't jerry rig one, I really would recommend getting a mouse bungee. So let's talk about mouse pads. Mouse pads, again, are a preferential thing, depending on things like sensitivity, size, and what kind of texture and speed you want to have. To be frank with you, I have the absolute least experience in this area, so I'm going to keep it fairly basic with my advice here. There's a document I'm going to link down in the description below called the Master Pad Spreadsheet. It's going to list out pretty much every well-known and easily accessible mouse pad that is known, its main traits and characteristics, and I think that that's really a good start for you. The way that I ended up choosing this Aqua Control Plus by Xraypad is I went on that sheet and I said, what do I want? I want a really big mouse pad because I'm a low sense player. I want it to track medium speed. I don't want anything crazy, and I want it to be easily travelable with, so that takes out a lot of glass mouse pads, and I want to be able to wash it consistently to get it to its original quality, which with this guy I actually need to do again, so this is a good reminder for me. And just as a quick note on the glass mouse pads, I personally wouldn't recommend one for you if you're just starting competing, because I do feel like the value on those isn't as good as something like just upgrading your mouse feet to sapphire skates or something like that, which will increase the speed and the texture, feeling smoother on your mouse and trackpad. With all that extra money that glass pads cost, you could just get a nicer, premium, different textured mouse pad that is going to be a little bit better for you and you could still travel with. So now that we're done with mice, let's talk about keyboards. I know they're going to seem a little less important than your mouse, but they are still an important part of your setup. I mean, think about it. Besides your mouse, monitor, and keyboard, what else are you really touching or interacting with, right? I'm just going to get this out the way. If you have any one of those fake mechanical keyboards that just have a click but are still membrane, or you're still using a membrane keyboard for gaming, get rid of that, swap it. They don't even provide the best experience for typing, let alone gaming, so it's going to feel like shit when you're playing your games, especially Counter-Strike 2 or Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I know because I started playing Counter-Strike Global Offensive on a membrane keyboard, and while it wasn't the first thing I upgraded, it was very quickly one of the ones that I upgraded after the fact because counter-strafing felt horrible on membrane keyboards, and I really wouldn't recommend it. For gaming, the very standard across all of gaming is a mechanical keyboard. I would say these range so much in price that most people have one of these, and you can find them either really cheap, or if you're into custom keyboards, you can build a custom amazing metal one that I'll talk a little bit about later and stuff like that. This specifically is the Keychron V1, and it's what I've used for years. I love this guy. It's customizable. It's completely hot swap, so I could take out any of these switches and change it for a different type of switch, whether that's linear or tactile. Effectively, all it does is do a couple things like change the actuation point, change the switch feel, whether it has a bump, it clicks, or it's completely smooth all the way down, and stuff like that. In my opinion, this is the ideal zone to be in when you're shopping for keyboards. You don't want to blow the budget on something like a Hall Effect keyboard if you're just starting, unless it's a very specific game you're playing that doesn't have banned things like SOCD or stuff like that. If you don't know what I just said, then honestly, the Hall Effect keyboards aren't going to provide a benefit for you, so don't even worry about them. The main benefit of these being so common and so cheap nowadays is that it lets you experiment. As long as you find a preferred switch in size, which I am really partial to the 75% layout, which is a like condensed, so you only get home page up, page down, and arrow keys. I don't want the actual number pad or anything like that. And you find a hot swap board, which is something I would really recommend. I really think you're hitting the most bang for your buck pretty easily. And the main thing I will say, and why I advocate for hot swap, is these little guys. So these are mechanical switches, and if you have a hot swap keyboard, you're actually super easily able to just pull a switch out. I'll actually see if I can show you really quickly. And doing this is pretty simple. You just get something like this. These are usually included with your keyboard, and you're just going to go onto the top and the bottom of the switch, grab it, jiggle it back and forth a little bit once it actually gets hooked on there. And once it does, the switch comes out just like that, and you're going to be able to ignore my cat's hair. I blame Elm. I'll put a picture up of her if I remember to. And that's the switch. And then you can just take one of these new ones right here, and they only go in one way, so I'll show you really quick. You can see that that's the port right there. The lighting isn't the best exactly, and I apologize for that, but they only go in one way, and all you do is you just put it in the hole, press down until you hear a light click, and it's going to be all set up. And now I have a tactile switch in this keyboard, and I personally actually do love these Razer orange tactiles here. I do think that they're really, really good, and I prefer tactiles. The only reason I don't actually use tactiles right now is because of what I'll get into next. Let's get into Hall effect keyboards. This is my newest addition to my setup. It's a little bit dirty. I've been playing a lot of games with it and stuff, but this is the Bridge 75. This is a Hall effect keyboard. What that means is that the switches are a little bit different. It is an aluminum chassis. If you could hear this thing, it is fully aluminum, this entire outer part made out of aluminum. It does 8K hertz polling rate, and it has Hall effect switches, which means that instead of a traditional mechanical switches, which gives you two options, either on or off. I'm not going to flip you off, but yeah. Instead, with a Hall effect switch, the switch is a lot more intelligent, air quotes, in that it gives you hundreds, if not thousands of inputs as you slowly start to push down the switch. So for example, if I'm strafing, it will know how much I have pressed down exactly to the millimeter, W, A, S, or D. The main benefit of this is the features that you can use. Some are banned in Counter-Strike, like Snap Tap or SOCD, but other things like Rapid Trigger are not. That means that as soon as I lift this up, even if I'm not resetting it up all the way like I would have to with a mechanical switch, it will know to stop even if I move it this much and get halfway in. I know it's not the best visual example, but if I'm all the way down and I slide it up a little bit and then I tap D, it's going to be perfect. And I'll show a little bit of gameplay in CS to show you what I mean. So in Counter-Strike 2, I've noticed two main ways that the Hall effect keyboard is very helpful. I will say it did have a bit of an adjustment period, and I had to tweak the settings a little bit to get comfortable with them, but now that I am, it's really good. So the main first thing that I will say is if you're jiggling an angle, your jiggles are much more consistent now. Before, I used to feel like sometimes I would over peak like this, and I'm so far out wide that if someone is peeking, I have to have an extra second or two where I have to cross back and then hide, and that second or two is very deadly, especially if you're thinking you're going to get peeked by an op or something. And making this much more consistent means I don't over or under commit and get either too much info and die, or get not enough info and I'm not being able to see the angle because I'm under peaking. The second one is going to be when I'm peaking an angle and I'm actually moving and shooting. So for example, if I'm entering on to the B bomb site here and I'm coming here full sprinting, I know I have to stop to clear this. I'm able to do that much more faster on a dime than if I were on a mechanical keyboard, because again of the 8000 hertz and the Hall effect switches having so many more data points on which to stop. So I can always come here and look how much faster it is to actually stop on a dime and get accurate shots off. These are going so near my crosshair that even in DM I can feel like it can look like running and shooting. And I think this is a lot of what the pros are complaining about with running and shooting being so strong now, but I do think that this is a very, very strong feature for Counter-Strike 2. Is it life-changing? No. If you're good enough at the game, I think you could replicate these just by knowing your keyboard and learning how to do it very quickly. But I think that this accelerates that to a point of, well, nobody's actually ever been thinking about their movement that much, that it looks a little bit unfair, but I promise you it's doable with a regular keyboard. So without further ado, let's get back into the main video. Now, do I recommend getting a Hall effect keyboard? Kind of. If you're already pretty deep in and you feel like you're kind of hitting a wall or something and you're kind of almost peaking, you feel like you're kind of getting to the higher levels of where you're at, I think that you could legitimately benefit from a Hall effect keyboard. I've noticed that it significantly improved a lot of my games. I felt like I was in a slump, honestly. I got this keyboard in and I have felt really, really good playing Counter-Strike Pugs with it. I've won a couple clutches and stuff, and I honestly don't think I would have won certain scenarios without this guy. Is it a life changer? No, because I know that everything I could have done with a Hall effect keyboard, I can also do with a mechanical keyboard. It's just a lot harder. And a lot of the stuff that you're seeing with the Counter-Strike 2 controversies, like moving and shooting, is really just fast and counter-strafing. You effectively just keep running, counter-strafe really quickly, get back your accuracy, and then shoot. And the Hall effect keyboard is perfect for taking advantage of that, because you can take advantage of it registering your stopping and shooting through rapid triggers so much faster. So yeah, I think I've been really happy with something like this. Do I necessarily recommend it to everybody? No. I think you can get away perfectly fine with just a regular mechanical keyboard until, let's say, a couple years into your journey. If you have fuck you money, sure, by all means, go ahead, get a Hall effect keyboard like a Wu-Ting. This is called the Bridge 75, and quite frankly, I am a big fan of it. The only thing is the software is a little rickety, but I think that once you set it up after the first time, you're fine and good to go. So this next part, I'm probably not going to film as much of. Honestly, I'm just going to talk over and do a voiceover for this part because it's monitors. And as much as I would love to film the monitors and show you the difference, I might do it with a little bit of a close-up. I don't think that I'd be visually able to cut the difference to come across on video as well. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the main differences in a more evidence-based manner. If you're just starting out, there's going to be two main things you're going to have to look for: panel type and the refresh rate. So let's get into panel types first, just because it's not going to matter as much, and I want to take a little bit more time on talking about refresh rates. There are three primary types of panels. You have your TN, your IPS, and your VA. The TN panels usually have the fastest response times and are the most common for competitive gaming monitors due to how little they have motion blur. They do lack a lot of color accuracy, and they don't have great viewing angles. Like if you're looking at it a little bit off, the colors are going to seem kind of off and it's going to look very weird. And that's why a lot of people actually favor IPS for its better color accuracy, viewing angles, and overall just kind of better visuals. VA panels sit somewhere in the middle, and they have decent color, but they can also suffer from ghosting effects. So I really wouldn't take the chance, if you're going to be looking into a monitor, of purchasing a VA panel unless you find a crazy deal. I would say either stick with a TN if you only purely care about response time, or a IPS panel if you want a little bit better balance, especially nowadays. Now, refresh rate is the key thing. The higher your refresh rate on your monitor is, it means it will have smoother visuals, which is critical for fast-paced games like Counter-Strike, Overwatch, and really any other competitive esport title. Refresh rate is a interesting concept. So the refresh rate term just means how often does your monitor update per second. A typical monitor, like if you have one in an office or anything like that, is going to be 60 hertz. So that means it's going to update 60 times in a second. The higher the number goes, the smoother your experience is going to be on that monitor, and that's going to be heavily important for any game like Counter-Strike, Overwatch, or really any esport title. 144 hertz is generally considered the baseline for if you're doing a competitive gaming setup or anything like that. And I think that if you're a little bit more further into your journey, 240 hertz and beyond offers a slight edge, but it's kind of like jumping from 2K to 8K hertz on your mouse. You're not really going to notice it too much. It's going to be very minor at best. One thing I will say about refresh rate is that you have to make sure your computer can actually push the frame rate that you're trying to get your monitor to output. Like, I know for a lot of Counter-Strike 2 players right now, the game is so poorly optimized, especially with some older hardware, that you can barely get 200 to 300 FPS. And if you're going to have like one of those new Zowie 400 hertz monitors, you're not going to be getting 400 frames a second because your computer is limiting it. So, after all that blab and shadow, what should I get? If you're just starting, 144 hertz panel, ideally an IPS one so you can actually watch shows on it too, because for a lot of people, these are primarily their only monitor panels, or, you know, they're just going to use their second one as like a whatever on the side monitor. If you're starting to take things a little bit more seriously, I would definitely recommend you get 240 hertz. While I do acknowledge that the actual impact isn't as heavy from going from 60 to 144, it definitely still is an improvement. Me personally, I use this Asus panel, which is 280 hertz, and I do like it. But the only drawback is that it is a TN panel, which, especially visually, isn't as good things for playing casual games like Tarkov that I'm not trying to compete in because there are dark spots that just look horrible, and I can't see anybody in those dark corners or anything like that. And the color accuracy isn't perfect either. For things like video editing, I also struggle a little bit knowing if the videos are oversaturated or not because, my panel is going to look different from yours, and with the TN panel, the colors can seem a little washed out and stuff. I usually don't like to focus on things like screen size or resolution because to some degree it's something that's relative to your preferences, but I would say that for me, the standard is 24-inch 1080p with, high refresh rate. If you're kind of leaning on the more entry level side of things, I would say you probably want to start with 1080p, but if you can, the jump up to 1440p is nice visually, especially when you're not gaming. If you can find it, I would heavily recommend getting a VESA compatible monitor, which means that you can swap out the arm for a third party arm, and it's going to give you a lot more adjustability and it's going to free up a lot of desk space. Personally, for me, this is one of the biggest game changers, not only for competitive gaming, but also just for having a desk setup in general, because it gives you so much more room to move stuff around, get comfortable, and, spread stuff out. If you have a lot of gear or if you're working on assignments at your desk too, it's really nice to have. So, when it comes to audio, there are going to be three main types of listening devices that you want to consider: headsets, headphones, and in ear monitors. Headsets like the Arctis Nova Wireless Pro are all in one solutions with a built in microphone. On this model, this just comes out of the side right here, and it's going to mean that it's a lot more convenient for a lot of people. I would say in gaming or in competitive spaces, these headsets are probably the most common, although I have seen a resurgence in IEMs, which I will get into in a minute. So, while these are a lot more practical, headphones, on the other hand, prioritize sound quality and very often lack a built in microphone. Like, if you've ever seen OC playing on the LAN where he can use the headphones he wants, he uses the DT770 Pros with an attached mic to actually be able to use comms. And the reason for that is that a standalone pair of headphones will always, or generally speaking, a lot of the time, provide better audio quality than something like this because you're just able to spend more money on only audio quality instead of having to add a mic, logistically take the time to pay an engineer to find a space to get the mic in and do stuff like that. And lastly, these guys, in-ear monitors. These go directly into your ear canal, kind of like, any regular pair of AirPods or anything like that, if you're familiar with those, and they provide sound. These are the KZZSN Pros, and I think that they're pretty sweet, honestly. I love these little guys, and they're super cheap. I personally love these in-ears for when I'm traveling and when I'm going to compete in a LAN. In that LAN that I was telling you about at the start of the video where I made finals, these are the guys that I was using. They're not anything crazy, they're not super expensive, but they did do two key things very well. One, they made the sound super isolated, so I couldn't hear the rest of the LAN center screaming and hollering and doing whatever the fuck they were doing when they were all losing. Unlike me, I only lost in the finals. That's a complete lie. I got my ass whooped multiple times. So, if you're going to pick one, what do you go for? Well, if you're always at home and you want just the most convenient ones, I can easily recommend getting a headset. You're going to be an all-in-one solution where you're going to have your mic, your headphones, you don't got to worry about anything. Most of them are wired, so they're just plug and play. If you want wireless, easy to get, and so on and so forth. If you're traveling, I would honestly recommend getting these guys. These are super nice at two key things. One, sound isolation, which means that when you put these in, you can't hear a lot of other stuff going on. Specifically, when I'm competing at LAN, these are wonderful for making it sound like, all that hollering going on in the background of people screaming and doing trash talking is just not as loud. You can barely hear it, and if you have your game turned up or music or whatever, it's just not going to come through. And the other key thing that it does well is sound staging. While you would honestly think that, at least for me, I initially thought that these would provide way better soundstage, when you're talking about in noisy environments, these do a better job at providing a really good soundstage where you can hear directional audio really well. Obviously, some maps like Nuke are going to make these not as effective, but if you're playing something like Dust 2 or Mirage or Inferno, these are really, really good at giving you directional audio, so you can really easily know where they're coming from, whether it's banana, mid, or they're doing a split into long or something. That's completely fine. You'll be able to get away with these, and honestly, they're so cheap that I think that if you wanted to try them out, just go for it, dude. You can find really cheap pairs of really, really good headphones for like literally 15-20 bucks, and honestly, I think that it's worth a shot. I personally love the in-ears for the soundstage, sound isolation, and the travel aspect of it. When I go to lands, these are the first thing in my bag because they cancel out all the noise so freaking well, dude. Like straight up, these things make it so that if you have audio in, it's like you can't even really hear what's going on outside of your headphones. I understand that for everyone, that's not a good preference, especially if you live at home by yourself or something, but I love these things. LAN, I don't know if it's just the bias from getting to a LAN final with them or what, but if I could go back, I would honestly say spend a little bit more on the in-ears. I've had wonderful experiences with these, and now that I have my own mic that I'm not relying on this guy for video and comms, I think that in-ears are honestly a wonderful balanced, very budget option, quite frankly. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good value on these. If you need a headset, which combines both the mic and the drivers in so they can actually produce sound, I would probably recommend something like the HyperX Cloud series of headphones, or a lot of products from Logitech are super good and pretty basic. I personally started with the cheap Tyler 1 set of Logitech headphones, and while I thought they were okay, I honestly had a lot of issues with them leaking audio, the mic feedback, hearing your own voice in the mic was something that I wasn't expecting at the time, and I honestly didn't really like it. So after plenty of time, I think that I got to this point, which is really good for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I spent a lot of time at my computer. If I'm not making a video or competing or scrimming, I'm usually watching YouTube or playing another game casually or talking to my partner on Discord. And being able to get up and walk around and control the volume from the headset itself here with this little knob right here between chat and audio, like from my game or YouTube video, is honestly a wonderful feature that I love having. Now, for everyone, I wouldn't really necessarily recommend these. Figure out what you like first, especially with comfort companies, stuff like that. But one thing I would recommend are these guys. And you're going to be like, Shadow, you're just still showing me the headphones. No, these ear pads are aftermarket, and these are called Wicked Cushions. These are super thick compared to the standard Steel Series ones. I'll put them up in a comparison. Just give me a second. This is the standard Arctis Nova Pro wireless ear cup. This is the typical one that is super shitty and gives me a lot of issues because when I put these headphones on, they have a little noise canceling nibbin inside here, and when I would put these on, it would rub straight into my ear and be super irritating and annoying, and I honestly almost sold the headsets because these were not thick enough and didn't provide the comfort that it needed. So these kind of suck. And when you compare them to the thickness and the size of the Wicked Cushions, I mean, I don't even have to say anything. Just look at that comparison, right? And these guys, so much thicker. They're so much spongier. They feel like they wrap around your ears. And if you wear glasses, this wraps around that little frame part so much nicer that I honestly would say if you're using headsets, get Wicked Cushions, get some form of aftermarket thicker cushioning because it makes the experience so much better, especially if you don't necessarily wear them for short periods of time. If you're scrimming and you're playing like 3 or 4 hours at night, and before that you're already on for like another hour or two doing either school or remote work, these are a must-have. Now, for this last part, I'm not really going to talk too much about it because, again, like I said, it's going to depend on region, your currency, what deals you can find and stuff like that. But when it comes to your PC, it's going to really depend on your specific needs. Are you streaming? Are you competing? Doing both? Maybe making videos on the side like me, trying to get in a little bit of extra income and viewership to your name? What game do you play the most? And how does that impact the type of hardware you need? Like, for example, Counter-Strike 2 is particularly CPU bound, so investing in a strong CPU like the Ryzen X3D series, which offers top-tier performance in CS2. The X3D chips have been well reviewed by some of the best in the industry like Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unboxed, and Linus Tech Tips, and I've seen great results personally. As for the rest of your components, it's all about finding the right balance between your budget, preferences, and needs. If you're unsure, communities like r/buildapc and r/buildapc sales can be incredibly helpful. And if building it isn't your thing, there are plenty of excellent system integrators out there as well. Although I would really, if you're on a budget, I recommend that you at least try to build it on your own because you're gonna save money regardless across the board, regardless of what tier you're in, just by building it on your own. Now, let me walk you through my own setup, which leans towards the higher end. My small form factor build was inspired by Steel's Fractal Terra setup, and I'm running a 7800 X3D CPU, 32GB of RAM, and a Radeon 7800 XT graphics card, along with, and this is excessive I know, 6.5 terabytes of storage for games, footage, and other projects. The GPU might seem like an unconventional choice, especially given Nvidia's reputation for features like low latency options, high performance streaming, and recording with shadow play or NVENC encoding. I think those are wonderful features. I did go with the 7800 XT because it offered a better value at the time. Its higher VRAM capacity and AV1 encoding, especially with open source drivers on Linux, were too good to pass up, and it was cheaper than getting a 30 or 4070 at the time. I forget which one was competing with it. If this isn't the case for you, I really would recommend getting a secondhand NVIDIA GPU because, in my opinion, the brand new NVIDIA series are always overpriced for what they are. I think at the time it was competing with a 4070, and the 4070 doesn't have 12, I think it has 12 gigs of RAM, or 8, I forget. Either way, I don't think it's enough, especially if you're playing other games that are AAA titles and you want to play with very good graphics or high details and stuff like that. Get the 7800 XT. It can be a little bit wonky sometimes, but overall my experience has actually been pretty good once I got used to it, and I think that a lot of people are in that boat. Long term, AMD provides plenty of value, and they have low latency options as well, just like Nvidia, but because their user base is so much smaller, it doesn't get as much light. But if I go into my CS settings and show you, I will have the lower latency option available right there. Is it as good as Nvidia? I don't know. I don't have the tools to test it. I'm not going to act like an expert, but do I notice a difference with it, especially in Counter-Strike 2? Absolutely. I did the math. The PC setup is going to be the most significant investment in the gear, and it should make sense like that. It's the heart of gaming and the competitive experience. If you didn't have the power to actually output 280 frames, you wouldn't be taking advantage of the monitor you use. If I didn't have the ability for my computer to keep up with 8K hertz on my mouse and my keyboard, I'd be limited in that regard. And I know how it can be. I remember starting out YouTube. If you've been subscribed to my channel for a long time, I've privated all these videos by now, but I was editing on a 4GB of RAM laptop in After Effects, dealing with crashes every half an hour. So now being able to work without those limitations is amazing for me. That said, you definitely don't need this level of hardware to get a great experience. If you're building your own setup, like I said before, take your time to research and absolutely look for sales. Subreddits like Build a PC Sales and tools like PC Part Picker can help you snag deals on components that are right for you. With a little patience and planning, you can easily get a setup that's perfectly tailored to your needs without even breaking the bank, and I think that's gonna be the main takeaway from this video. If you guys did like this video, please let me know. I spent a lot of time making this. I rewrote the script plenty of times, and I know it's not perfect. I'm still kind of young into this YouTube journey and getting back into it, but I do like to go overly ambitious and kind of make projects that I'm passionate about. And absolutely hardware and, peripherals and stuff like that, I absolutely love talking about. I have a handful of other mice off frame in a dresser that I could bring out, but honestly, it's just too much work, and I didn't want to bring them all out and talk about all the differences and stuff like that. But I can absolutely geek out over this stuff longer and take more time away from your day. But you guys should go, leave a comment in the description, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and have a good day, guys. Take care.